Okay, hello! Welcome to a brand new hammer tutorial for Half-Life in the Gold Source engine. And today we're going to be looking at skyboxes and lighting and how we can use them to make our map more interesting and realistic. So the first thing we're going to do is, as you can see, I've made a little map here already. I've got info player starting here, I've got indoors, and I've got an outdoors section. The first thing we're going to do is add a skybox. So what you want to do is click on browse in the texture browser and search up sky in here, and once you found the sky texture, just double click it, select it, and then we can use that with our brush tool or block tool to create a skybox. So the first thing we're going to do is create 4 walls. So I'm going to put one along this side of the map. Make sure it's there's no gaps between the skybox walls and the floor or the other skybox walls. So if we do that, make it quite high, so about there. That's good. When I'm going to select it and shift left click and drag, and then let go of the left mouse button and let go of shift, and you'll have copied it over to the other side. Okay, we've done that, those 2, and we'll do that a couple more times. I'll just rotate it and resize it so that it fits. Make sure there's no gaps. Okay, and then shift click again and drag it over like so. There's our 4 walls, and of course now we'll want the ceiling to our skybox. So if we just select one of your walls, shift click again and drag to copy it, and then resize it as necessary to create the ceiling. And that is our skybox done. Now the reason I did it this way instead of literally just making one big brush and, I don't know, hollowing it out, like if you do it like this is a really bad way to make a skybox, because if you do this, and you'll notice that all of these are slightly intersecting and can actually sometimes glitch out and cause massive problems when you're compiling your map. So what we do is actually create each wall and ceiling individually and use a separate floor rather than a skybox as the floor. So then we have only 5 brushes acting as our skybox and 1 floor to stop any, help prevent any leaks or errors. So now we've done that, let's save it again. You should probably save your maps quite regularly in case they crash or your PC crashes, or you've been working on for a long time and something goes wrong and you have to go back a few steps and so on. Saving maps is useful for that. But anyway, the next thing we're going to do is add a light entity to our outdoor part of the map so that we can see outside as though it's the sun. So I selected a light spot entity. If you select the entity tool and select light spot or light environment, and I placed it here in your map, you can and if you just move it, make sure it's within your map and not outside or sticking in a wall or anything like that. Then right click it, select properties, and then we can change its properties and make it into realistic light. So the first and most important one is that we check is the is sky property, and we want to change this to yes, because then what will happen is basically all the brushes which have the skybox texture on will be the source of the light. So actually it will cover the entire outside part of our map, which is what we want, as well as actually the sun. And then if we change some more properties and select your light again, you can change the brightness if you want. I'll leave it at 200, and change the colour. So if you had nighttime, maybe you would want a bluey, dark blue colour or something, and a slightly lower brightness or something. But we're going to leave it default because we're doing a daylight map. And you can change the pitch, which is very important. The pitch angle is basically the direction towards up or down. So at the moment it's at minus 90, which I believe is pointing down at the floor. And if you change that to something like minus 60 or something, and it will actually change the direction in which the light's going and can create shadows, which are very useful and can be quite realistic in some cases as well. So that's all you need to know. You can leave the appearances and leave all the other settings. Whoops. Yep, there we go. And also you can change the direction it's pointing in to change the direction of the shadows. So the direction of the shadows is changed by this one, and the pitch changes how large those shadows will be, basically. So the angle at which it's pointing from up or down or whatever. So if we save that, close that, and compile our map, then we can see what it looks like up ahead in game. I'll see you there. Okay, so here we are in Half-Life. If you bring up the console with the tilde key and type in map space whatever your map name is, so mine was light underscore tut, and you hit enter, then it should load. However, if your map did not compile because there was an error, or it didn't go to the Half-Life/Valve/maps directory when it compiled, so there's no BSP file for your map in there, then you'll want to check your settings in the hammer if you go to tools and then select options. But anyway, if you hit enter, then it should load up our map, and there we go. As you can see, it's pretty dark in here because I haven't added any lights yet. However, out here you can see that all these shadows are working well. The shadows for these big power generator things actually makes it dark on that side than it is on that side, and so on, which is nice. Makes it a bit more realistic. You can mess around with the brightness settings and the colour and things like that to make it more realistic as you want. But on the whole, I'm pretty pleased with how it is at the moment with these settings. And the shadows in that direction, so the sun would be from over there if the skybox had a sun in it. And then these fences, which I'm going to talk about and show you how to make them in a short while. Some of them are see-through, and this is my example block, which I will show you how to convert that so that it becomes see-through, and it adds a bit of extra detail to your map and some realistic fencing and so on, or whatever texture you want which can be made see-through. So if we jump right back into Hammer and get mapping again, and I'll show you how to make these fences. Okay, so here we are again, back in Hammer, and the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to make this fence, which we noticed was not see-through and had black parts in it, and show you how to make it like these fences in game, which were see-through. So to do that, you can do it with any texture which has this solid blue colour. So if you type in that special bracket key, and it'll actually show all of these textures which can be made partially invisible. And as you can see, there's quite a lot. You can make realistic grass and things like that. You can make netting and gratings and all of that. All of that, to make it see-through, you need to change the properties of the brush. So to do that, if you select the brush you want to make see-through or invisible, and right click it, click on property, actually tie to entity first, need to do that, and then select Funk. We'll go with Funk Rule for now. You can do the same, you can make them partially see-through in pretty much whatever entity you set it to, as far as I know. But anyway, we'll do Funk Rule, and the first thing you need to change is the render mode, and change it from normal to solid. And then we'll change the FX amount from 0 to 255. And that's it, literally. That's one of the simpler things to do in Hammer, to add a bit of detail to your map. You can add gratings for floors and other bits and pieces which you can see through, which are quite useful and quite make it a bit more interesting overall. Anyway, so now we've done all these fences are see-through, then we'll want to move inside the indoor part of the map now and add some lights in here. Right, so as you can see, I've got these light fitting brushes already placed, and I'm going to do these ones last. Actually no, I'll do these ones first. So the first thing I'm going to do is, the idea of this map is the lighting in here is on like the emergency lighting, and you have to go outside and turn on the power generators. And to do that you have to press a button to turn on all the lights. At the moment this is just a default brush, and we don't actually have any light entities, so that's not going to happen anytime soon until we select the entity tool and find either the light or light spot entity. It's probably wise to go with the generic light for most lighting, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a combination of the generic light and the light spot to make my funky emergency lighting. So first of all, I'll add an actual I'll add a light spot first actually, and then I can show you in game what it does. So this time, if you put it wherever your light brushes or whatever, you can find light fitting textures just by typing in light into the texture browser, and then bring up some of the default light textures. So anyway, these are some which I chose. If you get your light spot and have it like that, and right click and click on properties, and pictures -90, so that's pointing down at the ground, which is what we want because it's coming directly from the light. This time it's not the sky, so we'll leave that as it is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into some emergency red lighting. So add some emergency lighting. The good thing about light spots actually is that the only brush or part of the brush which gets lit up is wherever the light spot is pointing at. So in this case, only a little patch on this floor will be lit up, and actually the light itself you probably won't be able to see, so I can set that to a red light and you wouldn't know any better whether this light actually was red. So I'm going to change it to red just to make emergency lighting kind of feel, by selecting brightness and pick color. Then I'll just pick red, that's fine, and I'm going to change the brightness right down because I don't want it too bright because it is only emergency lighting after all. I'll change it to about 130, that should do for a light spot entity anyway. You can change the angles at which they fade and stuff if you have ZHLT, but if we're just using the default tools, you don't need to change any of these particularly. Okay, so we changed that brightness down and we changed it to red, so that's good. And now if we just deselect that, you'll see it turns to a nice bright red colour, your light entity. And I'm just going to, I'm going to give it a name, because what I want to happen is when this button is pressed, then the emergency lighting will turn off and the normal lighting will turn on. So if I change that to, so I give it the name of light, I'll just give all my lights apart from the outdoor light name of light. I'll just copy this for these. So you don't need to change any of the flags for these because they'll all be turned on at first. As well as these light spot entities, I'm going to add some other emergency lighting or some more ambient lighting. So these little screens, I can add some blue lighting coming off of them to make it a bit more realistic or something. Or I might just add a couple just to give it a bit more of a realistic feel, which won't be turned on or off because these lab server things will be permanently on. But anyway, so yeah, if you select your entity tool again, and this time rather than light spot, we're going to use a normal light entity, and we're going to place these. I'm going to place just a couple, so only a few of these screens will be lit up. I'll add one here. If we change the properties of this one, we can just copy it over to wherever else we want it, so add it there. Right click properties, change the brightness right down this time because it's a normal light, so it will go in all directions. So unlike the light spot entity where it points in one direction, lights up one specific point, these generic light entities light up everything around it like a sphere, and the higher the brightness, the further the light will go. So if I change the brightness right down to about 40 and change the colour to some sort of strange dark blue, yeah, I'll leave that as 40, that should be okay. I'll just make it a bit closer to the actual brush so that it lights it up well. Okay, so now we can do the same thing, copy it over to a couple other things if you want, so adjust it as you want. Add a couple more over here. Don't know, one there. Yep. And one over here. I only add a few of these because I'm not too fussed about the ambient lighting, but if you wanted to, you could add as many as you wanted and in different places. Okay, so we had to cut that briefly, but now we're back in Hammer. Right, so we've added these lights. It doesn't really matter where you add them, as long as they're in an ambient setting you'd want like a slight dark blue type thing or a white light emanating from a screen or something if you're in a dark indoor map, or you might have one main light which would be like bright green or something to symbolize like an emergency or whatever, to give it that bit more ambience, so the rest of the room is dark and things like that. I'll leave these lights as the emergency lighting. I'll leave all these lights for now, and if I show you in game, then you'll be able to see the effect that these light spots have and the effect that these small normal default light entities have in an ambient setting. So if we go right ahead, save this map and compile it, and I'll see you ahead in game. Okay, so here we are in game, and would you take a look at that? Now that's some nice ambient lighting right there. So you've got some of these servers lit up in a nice blue look so that you can actually see things. You can see the light from the door, from the outdoor light going all the way back there. You can change that as necessary, or you can add doors or something like that. Anyway, so this ambient lighting is nice, and you'll notice here you've got our light spots, but you can't actually see the source of the light. You can change that, of course. You can also, as well as a light spot, you can have a teeny tiny little light which is about as bright as about 10 or 20 or something like that, probably about 10, and have it right next to the light, then it'll light it up just that little bit in red or something, just to make it look like it's coming from somewhere. I'm pleased with that as emergency lighting goes, and you've got that nice ambient stuff. It's a bit dark on this side, but you can tell, you can actually see around in this little place a bit more easily despite the lack of lighting, and that's a particularly good reason to add ambient lighting into dark maps, because the player needs to actually be able to see where they're going, and you can use lights like these to guide them on the specific route or path that you want them to take if you're making a single player map, which is very useful. And there's many different ways of guiding the player, but ambient lighting is probably one of the most interesting and probably most I don't know, probably the best way to do it, to be honest. But of course you can use architecture and all that as well to guide the player. But we'll talk about that in another tutorial at some point. And of course, all this lighting is fine. If you had a weapon in your hand, I don't know if this will work. If it's like an Impulse 101, I'll have to enable cheats first. If I just save that and reload it, and bring up Impulse 101, hopefully that'll work. Oh, it didn't work. But basically, if you have a weapon and you're walking by a light, then the weapon will light up slightly. It will actually reflect some of the light, so you'll be able to see it under the light spot, but you won't be able to see it, say, over here in this dark corner. So yeah, that's the very basics of lighting right there. And the next thing we're going to do is just change this brush into an actual button entity, and that will be able to turn off the emergency lighting and turn on the proper lighting, which we'll add into a map in just a second. So if you exit Half-Life, and we'll jump right back into Hammer and carry on where we left off. Okay, so here we are in Hammer again. I'll just turn off Faps because else it'll add a bit of lag to Hammer, which we don't want. Okay, there we go. Now, if you take a look at our map, we've got our nice ambient blue lighting, and we've got our emergency light spots in our map already. But now what we need to do really is add some actual proper, so to speak, lightings which will light up the insides as though you would have normal lighting, so your light bulb in your kitchen or whatever. I don't know. Just generic, pretty standard brightness of lighting. So anyway, if you click on the entity tool, select the light and then place it under one of your lights, fit one of your light brushes, and then right click, change the properties. We'll change it from 200 to about, I'd say 150. 150 will do. We already give this light's appearance as normal, but I can change the appearance of a couple of lights to make it a bit more interesting in just a moment. So if you leave all that as it is, so name, change that to light, because we want these lights to turn on when the emergency lighting turns off. And to do that, we'll change into flags and select initially dark, which will ensure that these lights remain turned off, while the lights which don't have that flag check, so all these red lights, will remain turned on at the start and will be turned off by the button later on. So now if we just copy this line, add it beneath all our other light brushes as necessary, like so, and I'm gonna add a button property to this brush which I made here. So right click it and click tie to entity and select Func button from the drop down list, and the target will be light, and I think if we change the sound to something, I don't know, it bigs up and warm up because it's like a generator, isn't it? Delay before reset, we don't want this to change. It's not going to be toggleable, and it's also not going to be able to turn the lights on and off again, because we don't want that. We just want it left on permanently once it's been switched. So we'll leave it as -1. However, if you do want a button which is toggleable, then you can leave it as -1, but you can check the toggle flag in the flag settings. So yeah, okay. Delay before trigger, that's just how many seconds you want it before it actually triggers the lights. We won't have any locked sounds because it won't be a lock button. Health, we'll leave it as 0 because you don't have any weapons, so there's no point, but you could change that to any number, so you could like shoot the light and it would actually the button, and it would activate whatever the target is. So if you shot this button, then it would activate the lights, but we'll leave it as 0 so it doesn't actually do that because we don't have any weapons. Speed doesn't matter what that is because we're going to change that in a moment, so it doesn't actually move, because by default the buttons actually do move. So if you go onto flags and select don't move, we will leave it. We won't have touch activates for now, but if you had a button which, say, the player was part of a floor and the player stood on it, then you could have it so that touch activates and it could activate a trap or something like that, or a scene or whatever. And we'll also toggle sparks. I'll just add some sparks to it before it's activated, so that will spark just randomly. We'll leave toggle unchecked because we don't want to toggle it, because we don't want lights to toggle on and off, and we'll leave that one unchecked. So don't move and sparks we'll leave checked. And I don't believe we can need to change any other settings for the button. Now we've done this, if we just close those properties, and we'll change the properties of one or two of these lights in here. So I'm going to add So in this corner, I'm gonna add a bit of a flicker to this light to so that it's broken. So we can do that by changing the appearance, by selecting the appearance and its properties, and selecting anything from the drop down list. I'm going to choose flicker A, which will do. If you have any issues with fast changing lights or fluorescent flickering lights or whatever, then it's probably not wise to do this if you're epileptic or whatever. But otherwise, if you don't want to do that, then you can keep it as normal and it won't have any effects. But anyway, yeah, I'll change mine to flicker A, and that's all I want to change for it. The name is light, which is what we want. Initially dark, that's good. You select that, so this one in this corner should flicker when it does turn on, with any luck. And I'm also gonna add a couple more of these blue lights, because I feel like this panel, these two big black panels, need some ambient lighting as well. So if I copy one over here and change the properties of this one, I'm going to change the appearance to it to a fluorescent flicker. That's that's like on off, on and off, on and off, really randomly. That flicker. I think strobe is also on and off and on and off, but it's more on a set pattern. Leave that one. Add another. Copy it over here. Shift click again. Change the properties. I'll just leave this as a normal appearance, and I'll add a couple more of these normal ones to the other side, like so. And there we go. That is our map complete, I believe. So now we'll just open up Half-Life one last time, and I'll show you how it works. If we compile our map and click OK, and I'll see you ahead up in game. Okay, so here we are in game. I've tested the map a couple of times, but unfortunately it appears that seems to be a problem with my hammer editor. So actually the flag for initially dark on my lights doesn't work. I'm not sure why this is, but I'm sure I'll find a fix for it eventually. As for any of you guys watching this, if you replicate this, it should work for you. If not, then just tell me in the comments below, and I'll reply to them as soon as possible. Anyway, so if we launch the map, as you can see, the lights aren't working as they should do. They're already on, and also this light which I set to flicker isn't actually flickering. However, you can see these other blue lights which I added in are working. You can see this one flickering just here. Actually what happens is, when I hit the button, which is sparking as you wanted it to, nice loud sound, it automatically changes texture if it's certain buttons or certain textures. And as you can see, the emergency lights went off as we're supposed to do, but the main lights turned off instead of turning on, obviously, because so clearly there's a problem with my hammer. But normally what would happen in your own map, if you were to check the initially dark flag on the lights, then it would mean that if they were activated, then it would turn on rather than turning off. But yeah, so I hope this tutorial helped. If not, leave a dislike. If it did, leave a like or a comment below, and subscribe to my channel for more in the future. Nice seeing you, and I'll see you up ahead in a new tutorial at another point in time. Until then, au revoir.